for more on Hamas's attack on Israel and ahead of an emergency meeting of the UN's Security Council set for later today, I'm joined now by Canada's ambassador to the UN, Bob Rae. Hi, Ambassador Rae. Good to see you. Thank you very much for making the time for this.
Thank you, Betsy. Good to be with you.
I wanted to start off and just ask you for your thoughts on the level of brutality exercised by Hamas in this attack.
Well, I think, we can all look for adjectives. It's a terrible, terrible acts with this plural of terrorism across the country. Brutal in every way, cruel. I'm thinking particularly of the taking of the hostages, the parading of the hostages through Gaza. I mean, these are horrible events to see. I think the hard part, really, for me, is that those of us who really have argued for many, many years, believed for so long in finding a two-state solution, finding a solution that both sides recognizing each other side by side. Activity like this, actions like this, make that so much harder. And yet I have to say that I still believe that we have to keep that objective clear in our minds as we go through this crisis, because violence is not going to settle what needs to be settled. It has to be diplomacy and politics, but it is now we're in a war and violence will happen. Israel does have a right to defend itself, and that defense will be very tough. And because the violence perpetrated and the objectives of the other side are not two states. The objectives of the other side are the elimination of the state of Israel. And as long as that's the case, as long as one side is fighting for the elimination of the other, then it's very difficult to see how you can avoid more and more conflict. And that's what I think makes it difficult.
You wrote in an earlier tweet, or whatever it's called now, those who are so quick to turn to both Saudism and whataboutism should absorb this picture of an Israeli woman being driven in an open-air cart through the streets of Gaza. What context, in quotes, justifies or excuses this cruelty? Why did you feel like you had to write that?
Because I think it's a good instinctive reaction that we have as Canadians, and not just as Canadians, but as human beings. We like to say, well, yeah, there's also that. So people will say, well, there's the Israeli settlement policy, which Canada certainly doesn't agree with. And they put that alongside and say, that's the same as this. And you say, no, this is not the same. These acts of terrorism are different, and they reflect something else. And therefore we have to come to grips with that. But in doing so, I know I heard, or at least it was reported, that an Israeli cabinet minister said we have to be cruel. Now we have to be cruel. And the answer to that is no. Israel is bound by the rules of war just like everybody else. And I think it's really important as we get into this process of getting through the attempts to disempower the sources of violence, that everybody understand that there are rules as to how that can be done, and they have to be followed.
I imagine that Israel would say in response to that, Hamas broke a lot of those rules in this attack, particularly in their kidnapping of kids, for example, or the brutality of them.
Totally, that's what I'm saying. I don't think any of us have seen this kind of massive cruelty displayed so publicly in a 24-hour period as we've seen. It's awful. It's terrible, but we also have to remember that revenge is not. We don't seek revenge. We seek justice. And that, I think, is important to understand. This has got to be about the continuing pursuit of justice, eyes wide open, understanding completely what we're dealing with. And right now we have several difficult situations. We have the hostage situation, which is whose full dimensions we don't yet know. Today, allegedly, Hamas is going to reveal who the hostages are and where they are and the circumstances of their detention. But this is a very, very important issue for understanding what kind of measures can be taken to deal with them. The second is whatever may happen on other fronts of war. Hezbollah is under the control of Iran, just as Hamas is. This is a war that I firmly believe is being fueled and directed, and the technologies being used and all of the education that's been applied as to how to do this is coming out of Iran, that's very clear to me. And I think it's something we have to understand. None of this stuff is accidental. And Iran, of all the countries in the Middle East, does not accept the existence of the State of Israel. It has made it clear that it wants the elimination of the State of Israel. And so that's their objective. And it's pretty hard to talk to somebody who wants to get rid of you. I mean, that's you can try talking to them, but if that's their objective, then you're just negotiating your own demise, which the Israelis will never ever do, and neither would Canadians. And so we should understand that.
I just have a few seconds left, Ambassador, but I take from those comments there's no doubt in your mind that the level of coordination with which these attacks were carried out exemplify the backing of Iran or the involvement of Iran.
No question in my mind. I don't know how you could come up with another conclusion because, intelligence admittedly has failed us in many different ways, but I do think intelligence is pretty clear that the Iranians are very actively engaged in supporting forces outside their country that seek the destruction of Israel. That's not paranoia. That's evidence. We know that. And so what we hoped was that people would be driven by a degree of understanding the consequences of their behavior, as opposed to simply acting impulsively and with anger. As everyone knows, it's hard to be smart and angry at the same time. People in Gaza, the living conditions are very difficult. We all know that. But again, Hamas has to share some responsibility for those very living conditions. They have made no effort to reach out to Israel to say, we can't go on living like this. How can we solve and improve the conditions of our people? They've never said that to Israel. They've never offered that to Israel. All they've offered is to fight and to say, we seek to destroy you. And in their behavior yesterday, that's what they have reflected. We have to come to grips with that.
Okay, Ambassador Rae, I'm out of time. I do appreciate your time today. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take good care.
You too.